Welcome, everybody, one more time. For those of you who just joined, I'm Tom from EdReports. We're here to introduce our inaugural pre-K reports, which were launched last week. Hopefully, everyone's seen them already, but if you haven't, please do that right after the webinar. We'll also be walking through them today and telling you what they're all about. But before we do that, next slide, please. Thank you very much, Shana. We just want to take a moment because today is, of course, National Teacher Appreciation Day, and this week is National Teacher Appreciation Week. So I want to pause for that. At EdReports, we obviously appreciate teachers every day and every week, but we do like to take the opportunity to show that appreciation today and this week in particular, to say how grateful we are for educators across the country and around the world who show up every day for students and families and our future. We also want to give a special shout out to all of EdReports reviewers. Today's webinar is about our inaugural pre-K reports. We especially want to thank our pre-K educator reviewers and all of our K-12 educator reviewers as well, who help bring all of our reports to life. We wouldn't be able to do this work without you. So huge thank you to our educator reviewers for your expertise, your classroom experience, your passion for young learners, and your commitment to quality that you bring to every part of this process. So thank you very much. Thank you, teachers. Thank you, everybody. All right. Some quick introductions, and you're going to be meeting and hearing from all these folks shortly. But I'm pleased to say we have Dr. Shana Weldon, our Director of Pre-K, here with us today. We also have Bridget Bailey, who's our Pre-K Reviews Lead. We have Dr. Lillie Moffett from the California Department of Education. Very honored and privileged to have Dr. Moffett with us. Thank you. We have Courtney Allison, our Chief Academic Officer, and I am Tom Green, the Managing Director of Marketing and Communications at EdReports. So that's our panel hosting crew. And now it's time for me to pass over to Courtney.
All right. Thanks, Tom. So hello, everyone. Thanks again for coming. We have some goals today. If we do a good job here, we'll help you all better understand the EdReports approach to the pre-K reviews. We'll give you some support in navigating the reports and understanding how to use them. And we'll do that by helping to build your understanding about why we're doing this now, how the reviews really were done, how we designed the report experience on the website, because that was a new method and a new design, and then actually go over findings and, again, how to use those reports. So why pre-K? Why now? EdReports was launched in 2015, and we were launched in response to this need in the field to really understand whether or not instructional materials were aligned to college and career ready standards. And at the time, publishers responded to the shift towards standards, and states and districts really were left wondering about those claims and if they were accurate. So EdReports was developed to evaluate instructional materials based on the quality of their design, how well they structure evidence-based teaching, and supported learning for college and career-ready standards. And so to do this, we worked with educators. And as Tom mentioned, educators are really key to the way we work at EdReports, and we wanted those educators to be practicing educators in the field so that their voice was centered in evaluating materials. We've had a tremendous amount of impact over the past decade. The materials landscape looked really different 15 years ago. And there were those aligned labels, and the early findings were really sobering. In 2015, about 14% of K-8 math materials met expectations for quality. And when we shared that with the field, the great part was that the market really responded. And today, across all of our content areas, more than half materials meet quality standards that we've been able to set. And that's because of the transparent information we've been able to put out there so that the quality is visible, and we've created a trusted signal that created demand in the field. So pre-K today looks a lot like K-12 did back in 2015. It's super fragmented, it's very opaque, it's hard to navigate. And so our launch now is about accelerating the same kind of progress that we made in K-12 with pre-K, because we know that change toward quality is really possible, but it takes time, and this is a first step. This launch is coming at the same time that we launched our strategic plan, and there's good reason for that. We released our strategic plan that's for 2026 to 2029 a couple weeks ago, and the pre-K reports have roots that are 3 years deep. We've been planning and working toward this release for over 3 years. And they're a key part of this new strategic direction in action. You can see the plan's pillars here, and pre-K really connects to predictable innovation. We've been very transparent about what we've been doing in pre-K. We assembled a public advisory. We've done a lot of feedback with the field, both at presentations and conferences, and also through a variety of feedback channels. And we really are focused on making sure that we have rigorous educator-led reviews connected to our core excellence. So this pre-K launch advances that and overall really highlights the way that our strategic plan stays true to our mission while beginning this next chapter of impact and is a really critical part of that story. So hopefully you've got a sense of why now we would do pre-K. And I'm going to turn it over to Shana Weldon, who's our director of pre-K, to tell you more about how we built the review tools and build an understanding of that process. Shana.
Hey, good afternoon. In 2024, the National Academies issued a new vision for high quality preschool curriculum, and it really called for the early childhood field to really reimagine learning and curricular tools for pre-K classrooms. And so we use the National Academies report as a strong foundation for building our review tools. And that report was really centered on ensuring that all children have access to high quality preschool education that really supports their development and learning. One of my first tasks when I joined EdReports team was really to start having conversations with committee members from the National Academy study and just ask who else should I be talking to about this. And based on recommendations, I was able to form our first pre-K advisory in June of 2024. And we have 8 dynamic individuals who are professors, researchers. We have a district level ECE leader. We have a state researcher who all have committed their time on a quarterly basis to meet with me to provide feedback and support on our review tools for the past 2 years. And today we have Dr. Lillie Moffett here with us. And so I'm going to ask her to share a little bit about her experience as an advisory member. So Lillie, if you could share what initially motivated you to join the advisory group, and how would you describe your experience over the past 2 years?
Yeah, so curriculum is definitely a passion of mine and one of my main areas of focus in my role at the California Department of Education. So it's been really exciting to see this project come to life. And, we know how important high quality instructional experiences are for young children. So to finally have a research-based and tremendously thorough review of pre-K curriculum options and all in one place is a huge milestone for early childhood education. And I was, so excited to be a part of that. And, as an advisory member, I was able to provide feedback on the content and the structure of the review criteria. And this was at different time points throughout the past 2 years. And EdReports was just, really thoughtful about how they engaged us as our advisory group. And, they brought us specific questions they were grappling with and really took the time to listen and implement our suggestions. And later on in the process, I was even able to attend the reviewer training where I got to see firsthand, the rigor behind the review process and how detail-oriented and exceptional the group of reviewers were. And, overall, it was really just an honor to be on the advisory board. And I think what EdReports has accomplished is truly historic. So thank you to Shana and EdReports for inviting me to share today.
Thank you, Lillie. So in addition to getting feedback through the advisory, we arrived at our review criteria through extensive stakeholder engagement and expert input. So at EdReports, we go on what we call a listening and learning tour. And here's just a snapshot of how we engage the field to really inform our review criteria. And again, this slide just really represents a point in time, like when our initial listening and learning tour formally wrapped. But in reality, listening and learning never stops. We really prioritize engaging the field here at EdReports. And this tour was really a key part of how we gathered input to inform our review criteria. So through these ongoing conversations, my ultimate goal was really to translate this research into practical, usable review criteria. It was an ongoing process shaped by multiple rounds of feedback and refinement. A critical part of EdReports' work here is centering the voices of educators who we know are closest to the work. And so we did recruit and train reviewers in summer of 2025 to really just ensure they were well prepared to apply the criteria and use our evidence guides. All of our reviewers completed a hiring task, went through an interview process, so we really could ensure a strong fit and a high level of rigor. And all of our reviewers are experienced educators in early childhood education. They bring deep and diverse expertise. Some serving as classroom teachers, district level early learning leaders, instructional coaches, special education pre-K coordinators. We have a principal and even a professor who supports teacher prep programs. Here are some highlights on how we built the review tools. So now we'll talk about the review process and scoring. As you can see, there are multiple stages of the review process, each of which contains many substeps, all the way from confirming publisher participation to finalizing and publishing reports on our website. The curriculum review process was designed as a 16-week collaborative effort, really designed to ensure consistent, high-quality evaluations of instructional materials. And so multiple review teams worked in parallel, supported by a designated facilitator. They were guided by shared training, shared tools, and scoring calibration. And so each review team included 6 trained reviewers, and they worked in pairs. So there are about 50 indicators in our review criteria. So those were divided up, and each pair was assigned a certain number of indicators. And then again, there's a facilitator who works across review teams to really support coordination and consistency across teams. So in addition to the face-to-face training that our reviewers received, they also complete online training each week specific to whatever indicator they'll be collecting evidence on. The reviewers collect evidence on their assigned indicator from the materials, and then they meet weekly to review their findings and calibrate scoring. And then they finalize their scoring decisions and draft a rationale, which eventually turn into our draft reports. And then again, those facilitators help lead those cross-team meetings to align across review teams. And to really ensure that our reports are fair and accurate, we include an errors and omissions process as part of our review. So after publishers receive their draft report, they have the opportunity to identify any errors or omissions that they believe reviewers may have made. And so we carefully review all the submitted feedback, share it with our reviewers for reexamination. And this may result in updates to the report, which could include changes to the narrative, adjustments to scores, or in some cases, no changes at all. Publishers typically have 2 weeks to submit their feedback. Then we take an additional 2 weeks to review that information and determine whether any revisions are needed. And once that process is completed, then final reports are shared with publishers. So before we take a look at the review tools, it's important that we're just grounded in some key terms. So here at EdReports, when we talk about review tools, we really mean 2 things. We have review criteria and evidence guides. And so the review criteria really just identifies the indicators for high quality instructional materials, which reflects alignment to early childhood research and other key attributes that were recommended by educators. And then the evidence guide complements the review criteria by just providing more details. It has information about the purpose and research of the indicator. It has guiding questions, and then the scoring criteria at the indicator level. The review criteria is organized into gateways that group criterion and the indicators. So here's a look at our review criteria. The first section of our review criteria is just publisher provided information. Publishers give us that information. This information is not vetted. It's also not scored. This is just information that we heard from the field. This is what we want to know about a product. So we include that information along with the report. And then you can see Gateway 1. It covers how accessible the materials are and if they're designed to meet the needs of all students. You can see the criteria listed under each gateway. Gateway 2 covers all the content areas and developmental domains, which is our largest gateway. And then Gateway 3 covers teacher and student supports. Here's a snapshot of our evidence guide. Again, this just complements the review criteria by elaborating details for each indicator, including the purpose and research, the guiding questions, discussion prompts, and then this is where our scoring criteria is housed. And all the publishers had access to the evidence guide during the review process, and our evidence guide was published alongside our reports last week on the website as well. We spent a significant amount of time really developing and refining our scoring approach. We considered several key factors, and we really designed the scoring with the understanding that right now criteria are used to evaluate comprehensive materials, but at the same time, we're planning for flexibility so the tool can be used in the future to review domain-specific products. We partnered with a psychometrician to ensure rigor and validity in our approach, and the scoring model presented here really reflects where we ultimately landed after multiple rounds of discussion, feedback, and refinement. So at the indicator level, reviewers collect evidence from the materials using the detailed scoring rubric that's found in the evidence guide. And each rubric defines what it looks like for materials to meet expectations, partially meet expectations, or not meet expectations for each indicator. Now, at the criterion and gateway level, we use rule-based scoring. So roll-up ratings are determined by applying defined scoring rules rather than calculating averages or percentages. And really, this approach ensures that the findings represent consistent strengths or consistent gaps rather than being driven by a single strong or weak area. And so the way that our tools are organized, remember, each criterion is made up of several indicators and each gateway is made up of several criteria. So these are the rules that are applied at the criterion and gateway level. So in order to meet expectations, half or more indicators or criteria must meet expectations, and none do not meet expectations. When half or more indicators or criteria do not meet expectations, then the rating does not meet, and then everything else is partial. And so the criteria that we use, of course, is complex, and we know that materials are going to show specific areas of strengths alongside gaps. And so half or more really just acknowledges that there is some meaningful evidence of quality, even if it's not perfect. So it recognizes that meaningful evidence of quality without over penalizing. We also added a rule specific to Gateway 2, the largest gateway that covers our content areas and domains, and materials must also meet expectations in 4 specific criteria to get an overall rating of meets expectations. So materials also have to meet in curriculum approach and design, social and emotional development, language and literacy, and math. And here's some highlights about the review process and scoring. Now I'm going to turn it over to Bridget, who's going to take a look at our new report experience.
Hello, our wonderful website product team launched a new web design experience to highlight our new pre-K reports. As we walk through the pre-K reports, we want to start by highlighting the user experience. We designed and improved the website through an ongoing process that included feedback from educators and other users. We gathered input using surveys, focus groups, and one-on-one interviews. Individual interviews were especially helpful because they allowed us to observe how people actually use the site and identify challenges without outside influence. These sessions focused on how easy it was to navigate the site, understand reports, and use the information effectively. We also looked at website data to see how users interacted with the site. This helped us confirm patterns we saw in feedback and identify areas where users were getting stuck or leaving the site. Throughout the process, we collected structured feedback from both internal team members and external users, allowing us to make ongoing improvements based on real user needs. So as you explore the reports, everything is organized through gateways, which break the information into clear, meaningful sections. This view allows users to see ratings by gateway and click into each one for more detail. When you select a gateway, it opens the criterion view where you can see the ratings for each criterion within that gateway. When you select a criterion, it opens the indicator view where you can see the ratings for each indicator within that criterion. And when you select an indicator, it opens the rationale view where you can see the explanation for the rating assigned to that indicator. We really started by putting you, educators, at the center of the design process. We focused on what you need, how you move through reports, and where things might feel confusing or frustrating. From there, we treated this as an ongoing process and not a one-time effort. We tested the site, listened to feedback, and made improvements in multiple rounds. Each update was shaped by what we heard and what we saw users experience. So what you'll see on the website is a clear, user-friendly report experience that's designed to be easy to navigate and easy to understand. And I'm going to pass it back to you, Shana, for report findings and trends.
All right, so for the inaugural review, we reviewed 2 widely used products, which are found on most state-approved lists, Creative Curriculum for Pre-K and Frog Street for Pre-K. And Every Child Ready is what we consider an emerging or innovative product. Publishers submitted evidence that helped reviewers identify areas of strength and areas of opportunity. And we're grateful to the first publishers who participated, knowing the high bar that the National Academies has set. So this slide just really summarizes some of the trends across all the products. All 3 are grounded in strong research foundations. All 3 also have room for improvement when it comes to structure and organization, especially in online materials. Our reviewers found it difficult to navigate through several resources. In core instructional content, social and emotional development skills are consistently developed, reflecting its ongoing significance in the field. Social studies is the least developed domain, and we know that this is a small sample size, but this really may signal that the field has some work to do in just raising up the importance of social studies in early childhood. Curriculum approach and design, which looked at a coherent and strategic design. This is where we look for like the research aligned scope and sequence and clear learning goals. That was reviewed separate from domain specific skills such as language and literacy and math, and the alignment between the two. We found that to be uneven. For example, in some products, materials would partially meet expectations in curriculum approach and design, and then they also had evidence of some quality activities in some domains. And then other materials did meet expectations in curriculum approach and design, and then partially met in some domain-specific skills. Multilingual learner resources and scaffolds were present across materials at a baseline level. And then there were also multiple entry points for instruction across all products. So children had opportunities to experience instruction during center time, during small group, and whole group instruction. So we're going to look at the first product, Creative Curriculum for Pre-K. They did meet expectations for supporting responsive practices and diverse learners. You can see that there are some indicators where materials partially meet expectations. I want you to remember that a rating of meets expectations does not mean that the materials are perfect. There is some meaningful evidence of quality, as well as some missed opportunities. And so it's really important to read the report at the indicator level for more detailed information. And overall, Creative Curriculum for Pre-K showed strong guidance on building relationships and fostering family partnerships. There was a clear emphasis on creating inclusive, supporting learning environments. There were integrated supports for how to adapt instruction across developmental needs. There's some guidance for multilingual learners throughout the materials. And then some specific areas of development are around, there was some variability in how explicitly supports are embedded within daily instruction. as well as responsiveness to diverse learner needs and supports for children with disabilities. That's something that could be more consistently integrated. Creative curriculum for pre-K partially meets expectations for high quality, developmentally appropriate content, our largest gateway. It's important to remember that criterion 2.1, curriculum approach and design, this is where we look for research aligned scope and sequence and clear learning goals across several domains, which we reviewed separate from domain specific skills in the other criteria. So overall, creative curriculum for pre-K offers a broad range of play-centered learning experiences. They integrated multiple domains, literacy, math, science, social studies, and the arts. And they really encouraged a lot of active engagement and hands-on exploration. In some areas for development, our reviewers found there's a need for more consistent clarity and coherence in learning goals and progressions. The scope and sequence in multiple domains are not clearly articulated or connected to the daily instruction. Teacher guidance inconsistently really shows how skills build and deepen over time. And there's some missed opportunities to more clearly and systematically support skill progression across domains. In Gateway 3, overall, creative curriculum for pre-K did meet expectations. There was strong guidance for creating structured, engaging learning environments. There were clear instructional routines. There was a combination of teacher-led and child-centered learning. They promoted student engagement across those different settings. And there are some assessment tools and implementation supports. In terms of areas for development, there are some opportunities to really strengthen guidance on how to interpret and use that assessment data. All right, the next product, Every Child Ready. Every Child Ready partially meets expectations for supporting responsive practices and diverse learners. Overall, in terms of strengths, it does provide guidance for building positive relationships between adults and children. There are some supports for multilingual learners and children with disabilities that are available. There's some supports available. They provide a foundation for responsive and inclusive practices. And there's some areas of development for more consistent structures for ongoing two-way communication with families, with the need for a greater emphasis on shared decision-making with families, more consistent integration of responsiveness to diverse learners' needs, and a clear connection of those supports in daily lessons. Every Child Ready did meet expectations for high quality, developmentally appropriate content in terms of strengths. Overall, it's a comprehensive research-based, it has comprehensive research-based content across the domains. There were clear, defined learning goals, structured learning progressions. There was an integration of instruction across domains. There were consistent routines that support engagement, exploration, and skill development, and strong overall coherence and alignment across instructional components. Some areas of development, there's a need for more robust activities in science, social studies, and fine arts, and a clear connection between learning goals and activities, particularly in social studies. Every Child Ready did meet expectations for implementation, learning environments, and assessment. Overall, there are clear structures and routines that really support consistent classroom implementation, strong guidance for instructional delivery and classroom organization. There's a range of instructional approaches that really promote engagement across settings. They include assessment tools and implementation supports, and really provide strong support for classroom environments and daily routines. Some areas for development include limited guidance for interpreting assessment results, some missed opportunities to connect assessment data to instructional decision-making, and some variation in clarity and consistency of just implementation guidance across resources. All right, the final product, Frog Street. They partially meet expectations for supporting responsive practices and diverse learners. Some of their strengths include providing structures for building relationships and engaging families. The materials included consistent routines, communication tools, and opportunities for interaction. Some areas for development include really providing more consistent supports for diverse learners. There are also some missed opportunities for more specific and actionable differentiation guidance. And supports for multilingual learners and some inclusive practices tend to be a little more general rather than detailed. Frog Street also partially met expectations for high quality, developmentally appropriate content. In terms of strengths, they offer a broad range of age appropriate content organized through thematic units. There are supports integrated. There are supports for integrating learning across multiple domains. There's strong opportunities for social and emotional development and language and literacy. And there are a lot of instructional routines that really promote active engagement. Some areas for development include more clarity and coherence in math, science and engineering, social studies, and fine arts. Learning progressions were not always clearly or systematically articulated, and there were some missed opportunities to really show how skills build within and across domains over time. Frog Street did meet expectations for supporting implementation and intentional teaching. There was strong guidance for classroom organization, daily routines. The materials provided clear instructional structures that really promoted consistency and engagement. It provided structured lesson components and modeling strategies. There were predictable routines to really support implementation across different settings. It included assessment tools to really monitor student progress, and it had a comprehensive implementation of supports overall. An area of development, there was a missed opportunity to really strengthen some guidance for helping teachers make more decisions around for instructional decision making. So here are some highlights of the common strengths and gaps across programs. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Bridget to talk about how to use the reports.
So now that we walked through the reports, I want to take a moment to ground how these tools can best support your work moving forward. So we want you to use the reports as one input to support curriculum decisions. EdReports reviews are designed to inform a comprehensive educator-centered process grounded in local needs and multi-year planning. We want you to look beyond summary ratings. Each gateway includes a rating of meets, partially meets, or does not meet expectations, and the full report provides detailed evidence across all criteria. We want you to use reports and resources as learning tools to build a shared understanding of what high-quality instructional materials and support should look like. And we want you to use reports to guide conversations with publishers, helping teams ask stronger questions about access, content, coherence, and teacher supports. To get the most value from these reports, it's important to understand what they are not designed to do. Don't use the reviews as a sole basis for purchasing decisions. Curriculum choices should reflect local priorities, educator experience, and implementation needs, including professional learning. Don't treat the reports as rankings. They provide transparent evidence about curriculum quality, not ranked ordered lists or recommendations. Don't assume the reports reflect classroom implementation. EdReports evaluates materials as designed, while successful implementation depends on factors beyond the curriculum. And don't review the reports as a complete picture of program quality. Elements such as teacher qualifications, professional learning, compensation, and class size also play a critical role. So this is just the beginning, and we love your partnership as we continue to grow and improve these reports. So please spread the word about the reports, why they matter, and how to use them. Sign up for our email newsletter and follow us on social to engage and share. We'd love to hear your feedback through our Contact Us form. This report release is just the first step, and we're excited to continue improving the experience. Please share with us what's working well for you and where we can make it even better. I'm going to hand it over to you, Tom, now for some Q&A.
Thank you so much, Bridget. Thank you, everybody. And thank you everyone attending for all your questions so far. Just reiterating, don't worry, we do see the questions. I've answered a couple live as we go, but there are some I wanted to save for the panel to answer as well. So we'll be getting onto those now. So first of all, Lillie, we'd love to ask you a question first. Thank you again for being here today. We've got a question asking what excites you most about the reports, and also how do you hope others will use them?
Yeah. Thanks, Tom. So, I mean, I think overall, I'm just excited about, how this process came about and now there's like a one-stop shop, for all these reviews and one place everyone can go that, really reflects the most updated research and guidance, especially from the National Academy's report. And I also really appreciate how when you go into the website, and you look at the indicator level. I know Shana mentioned this, but you can really see like the concrete evidence that the reviewers, when they reviewed all the materials, they list out activities, they reference page numbers, like it's super comprehensive and detailed. And so I really encourage everyone to kind of get to your second part of your question about how to use the reports. Really read them. Like, don't just glance, don't just kind of look at the little green square, oh, meets expectations, must be great, like kind of really look and dive deep into some of the descriptions to really see the nuances across all the criterion and the indicator level. I think the detail in there is just, fabulous. And you'll really leave the website with a deeper understanding of what's really in these curricula. So, and then I'll also reiterate, just, make sure that this is kind of like one source of input for your curriculum decision-making. And, that when we choose curricula, it's really important to see what best fits the needs of your community and the children and families you're serving. And so, this is just another source of evidence and really rigorous piece of evidence of how curricula meet certain quality indicators, but also consider other factors to make decisions about curriculum, especially about the communities you're serving.
Thank you so much for that, Lillie. And again, really appreciate you being here today and all of your work and support on the advisory for this whole process. I'm going to go to Bridget next for our next question. We've had a lot of different questions on this theme around which products, pre-K curricula will we review next and how will we decide? So Bridget, I'll hand over to you on that one.
Sure. So we're in regular contact with curriculum publishers to determine readiness for review and to request access for materials. So we prioritize for review based on multiple factors, such as stability, relevance, market share, and field demand. So we are aiming to start our next round of pre-K reviews soon, with reports expected later this year. So we're going to be reviewing additional programs beginning this summer with the hopes to publish 3 more before the end of 2026. But we're still finalizing details and with the publishers for the next round of reviews, and we're going to share which programs commit soon. This year's reviews, we're going to stay around the 4 or 5 age pre-K multi-domain products, but we are going to begin to investigate some domain-specific products and those for young learners for potential future reviews. But you can also help us out by suggesting materials for review using the form. We're going to drop it in the chat for you. Thank you, Tom.
No problem. Thank you so much, Bridget, and thank you to everyone who asked questions on those themes. Hope that answered them. But yeah, please do use that form as well if there are particular products you'd like to see us review and consider for review. Shana, a question calling back to some of the things you were presenting around how the reports and the review tools are structured. Could you say more about the relationship between that curriculum design criterion in Gateway 2 and the domain-specific criteria alongside it in Gateway 2?
Sure. So in Criterion 2.1, this is where reviewers really looked at curriculum approach and design across domains. So this is where reviewers were really looking for a coherent and strategic design and approach. And so this included, did the materials have clear learning goals? Do they have a research aligned scope and sequence? Do they have a research supported instructional practices across several domains? There were like 6 indicators in that criterion. So within 2.1, again, there are those domain specific indicators that 2.1A through F. For example, indicator 2.1b looks specifically how materials support language and literacy instruction through a comprehensive approach. So that's where we're specifically looking in literacy to see, are there clear learning goals? Is there a well-structured scope and sequence? Are there research-supported instructional practices? But so in addition to that, we also have separate criteria for each domain to really evaluate content and skills. So, for example, criterion 2.3 looks more specifically at how materials support essential language and literacy skills, including vocabulary, language development, concepts of print, alphabet knowledge, comprehension, early writing, etc.
Yeah, thank you very much, Shana. And we had a related one actually while we're on Gateway 2. A question around how did we evaluate the mathematics components, and did you see any trends across the curricula for math?
Okay, so same, reviewers looked in Gateway 2 at the curriculum approach and design for math. So again, reviewers are looking for clear learning goals, a research-aligned scope and sequence. In math specifically, we were looking for a scope and sequence that followed the learning trajectories that have been established in math, and of course, research-supported instructional practices. But then in addition to that, we're looking across key areas around numbers and counting, numerical relationships and operations, geometry, spatial thinking, as well as mathematical processes and skills. And so reviewers were looking to see how well math was integrated into meaningful experiences for children, including play and specific routines. We were looking to see if materials provided specific teacher guidance to really facilitate math thinking. And our reviewers did find gaps in materials being aligned to math learning trajectories. And there were some missed opportunities across products to really provide more robust activities to support mathematical thinking.
Thank you very much, Shana. And one more question I'd love to ask you, Shana. What should districts and school systems do concerning kind of pre-K products or curricula that we haven't reviewed yet?
Good question. You don't have to wait for a review to really look at curriculum quality. If you really want to better understand the quality of your current materials, you have access to our review criteria and our evidence guides. You have these reports, and what you can use them to really just clarify what does high quality materials, what should they include, what should it provide, and really use all of those resources to navigate. And so if you're considering adopting new materials, again, at EdReports, we have some guidance around how to lead a comprehensive educator-led adoption process. And so we have links on our website that have a lot of different resources, and we'll also have one specific to pre-K that's coming soon. But we ask that decision makers really just begin with local priorities. Identify what is your instructional vision, what are the needs that you really want your curriculum to address, and then use our resources along with other tools and local processes to really just evaluate your options and even ask better questions to publishers.
Thanks, Shana. And I'm going to put you on the spot for one more because it's somewhat related actually to this topic. So given that EdReports has reviewed age 4-5 products for these 3 curricula, so that's what we at EdReports and a lot of people in the field call pre-K, that age 4-5 group. Can school systems use those reviews to evaluate the same publishers' products for age 3-4 products? or mixed age 3-5 groups?
So our first reports do focus specifically on products designed for children ages 4 to 5, specifically the year before kindergarten. So we have not officially reviewed any mixed age products, although Every Child Ready curriculum does cover the course of 2 years, but we specifically only reviewed the pre-K 4 materials. That being said, the reports can still serve as a helpful reference point. Decision makers can use the published reports along with the review tools to just really better understand what quality looks like in materials, continue to ask better questions to publishers. And, some aspects of the curriculum may be similar across bands, such as the research base, the curriculum approach and design as well. And so I think when you think about that, then the reports that we do have, they can help guide conversations with publishers about what is the same, what's different, and whether these mixed age materials may meet local needs. I think the key point really is to use the reviews as evidence and a guide for questions and not as a substitute for a review of a particular product.
Thanks so much, Shana. I'll give you a break and move to Bridget for our next one. Bridget, we had a question about how we evaluate a product's approach to play-based learning, including child-centered learning. Could you speak to that?
Sure. We have a couple of indicators that are specifically geared towards that. So we have indicator 3.1A, which evaluates how well materials support a child-centered, engaging learning environment. We have indicator 3.2A, and it asks whether materials are intentionally leverage a mixture of direct instruction, open-ended, experiential, and play-based learning experiences. And then a number of our domain-specific indicators in Gateway 2 also consider the use of play-based approaches. That's math, science, and social studies. So, our evidence guide really does include a lot of detailed information on multiple learning modes and specific look-fors for our reviewers.
Thank you very much, Bridget. And another one for you, Bridget. We have a question about, could you speak about how the reviews address the assets and needs of multilingual learners and dual language learners, please?
Sure. Multilingual learners and dual language learners are both supported very explicitly within the diverse learners criterion, which is 1.2, and it includes an indicator focused on multilingual learners. So within this indicator, we examine how materials value and build on students' assets, such as home language, cultural identity, and prior knowledge, including whether bilingualism is positioned as a strength and whether children have opportunities to use their language and see it reflected in instruction. And we also evaluate how materials support access and language development, including scaffolding, for example, using visuals, modeling, structured language opportunities. And then we also wonder if guidance for differentiated instruction across those levels of language proficiency is available.
Thank you so much, Bridget. And thanks again for everyone for all the questions. We've got about 10 minutes to go, so we're going to try to get to as many of those as we can. And hopefully, I know there are a few questions that folks have asked that sort of variations on ones that have been answered. So hopefully you caught those. But Shana, I wanted to go to you with the next one because we had a great question around how our pre-K reviews approach efficacy or studies such as What Works Clearinghouse findings.
All right. So currently, EdReports reviews materials as they're written, not how they're implemented. And part of that reason is really there's very limited, robust, independent evidence showing that any single pre-K curriculum is effective across multiple settings and populations. Again, we asked publishers to provide information that we did include with our findings, but again, it hasn't been vetted. We know that materials are just one part of the equation. We know that even strong curricula require high quality implementation, teacher support, local alignment to really impact student outcomes. As part of the process, we do ask publishers to submit additional research or evidence that you'll see in that publisher provided information. We also give publishers an opportunity to include that in their background information as well. And just looking ahead to the future, we're trying to explore how to provide the field with clearer signals around evidence and efficacy across not only pre-K, but K-12 materials as well as part of our longer term strategy.
Thank you very much for that one, Shana. There were a couple of related questions we got around the fact that of the 3 reports that we've initially published, 2 are currently listed as under publisher revision. And we had a related question around if a publisher makes changes, how will we approach that in the future? Courtney, I was wondering, would you mind speaking to that, what that under publisher revision label means and how we approach that process?
Sure. So we know that when the reports are published, that often publishers want to make changes that they didn't have time to make during an errors and omissions, and sometimes that requires substantial revision. So we offer publishers the opportunity to say, hey, we're making changes. And within that, we ask them to detail their changes and to share with us a timeline of those. And then when publishers make changes to materials, they'll resubmit them to us. I know someone asked a timeline question, and it's a little hard because it depends on the nature of the revisions. It depends on how extensive they are. It depends on how many indicators it actually affects. And that's going to determine how long a re-review is going to take. But we take the information about the materials, we hand that back to reviewers so that they can look again at our criteria and at the revised materials. And then if that demands changes in the report, either in scores or in examples and information that's provided narratively, then we update those reports and we'll rehang them on the site and we'll let everybody know that they're there. So it's an important part of our process that you're able to transparently see where publishers are going to make changes, and then that we follow up and actually detail in the reports if those changes have been made.
Thank you very much, Courtney. And Courtney, I actually wanted to ask you one sort of follow-up question or tie a couple of threads together because Shana mentioned in the last question around how we're thinking about efficacy, and that's obviously one of the quality signals you mentioned as part of our strategic plan that we're going to be exploring across pre-K-12 in the future that we hope to kind of look into. And relatedly, we have a question in the webinar around supplemental programs for pre-K. So again, that's another sort of related topic that we're thinking about. Could you speak to that, how those fit into our strategic plan and how we're thinking about approaching that work in the future, those kind of explorations?
Yeah, those are both things that we know that the field is really interested in understanding more, both from whether or not and what are the conditions that make a product effective when it's actually implemented. And then this conversation about supplementals, which really in pre-K, again, is domain-specific supplementals. And so we'll be spending a good part of this year diving into research around this. It's about our strategic plan and making sure that we have time to do real thinking and understanding from the field and listening to all of you about what's important, then testing out some signals and then figuring out what the right signals are for the field. So stay tuned for more information about that. In pre-K in particular, we'll be examining domain-specific materials that are supplementals in math first. We know that that's something that people are really focused on, and we know that there's room for improvement in materials in math. And so we'll be researching that, and then we'll be deciding if reports or some other signal is the right way to get information to the field. So excited to share lots of updates in the future about that.
Thank you, Courtney. And we've got time for a couple more questions, I think. Thanks to all of those of you who've submitted. Apologies in advance if we don't get to all of them. Shana, there's one here which I don't think we've spoken to in detail yet. I'd love to, open the floor for you. But we've got a question here around what consideration did we give to how easily the curriculum could be used by non-traditionally trained teachers and or new teachers because of the the pre-K sector is characterized by, a high prevalence of non-certified teachers and can be by high turnover rates as well. Could you speak to how, you all thought about that when designing the tool?
Yeah, so Gateway 3 really looks at that. We are looking at teacher supports as well as student supports. And so we did look to see if materials that we use the term educative, right? Is there enough information to really help guide teachers to have a better understanding of the research behind the way the curriculum was designed and the information and how that information is applied? So we did look for evidence of that in Gateway 3.
Thanks so much for that one, Shana. And um, a related one, at least in terms of being about the tool design and how we thought about the scope of the tool. So we've got a question here around are the reports and the review process geared for a full day pre-K offering that includes reading, math, science, and social studies? And if there's a product that does just one of those domains, how will the other domains be scored? I think that gets to what we've spoken to around domain-specific products, but is there anything more you'd like to share on that one?
Yeah, I think that's something, like Courtney mentioned, that we are still figuring out, in terms of how we're going to use the tool flexibly. We did design it with the intent, whether that means we gray out certain sections of our review tool and just report a score for that section. I think there's just some more work to be done to figure out, like, where are some other elements of quality that apply across domains. For example, is there information from social emotional development that we also want to look for in math-specific materials? Things like that we want to make sure we get a lot of feedback around so we can identify, like, what are some additional indicators besides what's in that domain by itself before we finalize what that should look like.
Thank you so much, Shana. I think we've got time for one more. This one's a really interesting one actually, which is, when an indicator is labeled partially met. Although, to your point earlier, Shana, this could apply to a meets as well indicator, because that doesn't mean that everything is 100% perfect. But how can folks using the report best distinguish between growth areas for the curriculum or the product itself versus like a potential intentional pedagogical opening that requires a teacher's expertise? How would you think about that one, Shana?
Yeah, I think it's important to just encourage people who are using our reports to go beyond those summary ratings at the gateway level and even at the criterion level. It's critically important that you look at the indicator level and really read the rationale that is available, because there is a wide range of partially meets among products. So what it looks like in one product for partially meets could mean something different in another product. So you want to make sure you read in the report, specifically at the indicator level, to really look at some of the concrete evidence and the examples that are provided that is going to clearly give information at the indicator level. And like, that's the best place to start, because again, the criterion ratings and the gateway ratings are roll-ups of that information, but you really have to dig in order to get the specific detailed information that you need to really help you make a decision.
Well, thank you very much, Shana. I know we've reached time, so I just want to say thank you to everybody who joined, everyone for all the great questions. I know we didn't quite get to all of them. If there's a burning one that you feel like we didn't answer yet, please do use our contact form on our website and to send it our way, and we'd love to get back to you on that. I'll just paste that now in the chat. And just before we go, I want to say a huge thanks again to all of our panel for being here today. Dr. Lillie Moffett, Dr. Shana Weldon, Bridget, Courtney, and my name's Tom. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here, and have a great rest of your day. Happy Teacher Appreciation Week and Day too. Thanks, everybody.